This episode of the Byron Lazine podcast, I have David Childers, the president of Keeping Current Matters, or you may know it as KCM, on the pod. He shares so much insight into our industry and how agents, team leaders, and brokerages should be relaying information to the consumers. His market expert and just the way he breaks it down is so valuable for all of us to take from that, to take that skill and use it in our business. I don't want to get into too much of the conversation. It is fascinating. Make sure you don't miss it, and make sure you don't miss the link below to Sisu. Sisu, all the teams that are on Sisu, their volume goes up over 100%, and individual agents on Sisu, their volume goes up over 25%. It's where transactions happen online. If you want to actually automate your business, not feel stressed out about having everything input into one place where, because it's in a million different logins, you got to get in to Sisu. Check out the app, check out the link below to start on Sisu today. Can't wait to hear your feedback on this podcast with the president of KCM, David Childers. Hope you enjoy. Sitting here with David Childers, the president of Keeping Current Matters, KCM, as you probably know it. David, really appreciate your time. You just crushed a keynote.
We just got done here, at Boomtown. Yeah. So, Byron, it's good to be with you, and big fans of all that you're doing and BAM's doing, and so grateful for it.
Yeah, you're probably seeing David, if you haven't already, on the walkthrough on the BAM podcast. So really excited about all of that stuff. I want to just get into, because I haven't actually seen a lot of it. Always seeing you adding value to the real estate community. Mm-hmm. And you do a great job of doing that, but I haven't actually ever seen a podcast where you talk about your background and how you got into this position. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, so I've been in the business for a little over 20 years. I started out in college, I'll tell you a quick story, working for John Maxwell, who's a leadership author.
Yeah.
Who then graduated big time. Yeah. Graduated from college and went to work in the mortgage business.
Okay.
Working for sort of the lead trainer in the mortgage business and learned the business that way. So I've always been in tools and resources that are helping loan officers, title agents, real estate agents grow their businesses, be the expert, and that's really been my background. I spent a little bit of time in the business, working for Bank of America, spent some time working in real estate, in finance, and so, for the last, 14 years have been involved at KCM. So the interesting story there is I was at a conference, just like we're at now, and a friend of mine said, "You've got to meet this guy who just sold his real estate company." His name was Steve Harney, who many people know, who founded Keeping Current Matters. At that time, it just sold the largest real estate company in Nassau and Suffolk County there in New York City and Long Island. Yeah. And said, "I just want to help agents." And if you remember back in 2008, there were a lot of questions that people didn't have good answers for.
That's right.
We got to a point where everybody was like, "I think we're all going to die." And that was really where the housing crisis ended up for us in the business. And at Keeping Current Matters, we started giving agents answers to the questions that consumers had. Yeah. Should I sell? Should I buy? What's going to happen? Should we do a short sale? Should we do,
what is a short sale?
Totally.
It was foreign
totally. At that time, nobody wanted to do
That's
a
right.
short sale.
Yeah.
And so for the last 14 years, what we've said is we want every family to feel confident when buying and selling a home. And that's what drives us.
So you were there from the beginning.
Absolutely, yeah. For the first 4 years as a consultant,
Yeah.
just saying, how do we get this tool in the hands of agents? And that was Steve going out speaking. I'll never forget the day that he called me and he said, "Everywhere I go, people just want to buy the slides. And so we're going to sell them the slides."
Everybody wants the slides.
Sounds good. Let's sell them the slides.
They're all over Instagram.
Absolutely, yeah.
The explosion of the KCM growth, it seems to me, it's interesting that you guys have been going at it for 14 years.
Yeah.
The growth explosion of the brand over the last 2 years in particular has seemed like exponential.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. So throughout the last 14 years, Steve's son, Bill Harney, is the CEO.
Yeah.
Now, Bill has absolutely grown and been the mastermind behind the growth of KCM, but there was a critical point. If you remember that March 13th was the Friday Well, they said, hey, we're going to go home for a couple of weeks and we're going to come back and we're going to be through this. And now we're recording this. We're a couple of years later.
Yeah.
And I don't think we all could have, made it through if they said, hey, this is going to be through 2 years. And, good we didn't know that. But Bill made a decision that we're going to do everything in our power to help KCM members and help our industry.
Yeah.
And that's when we started, recording every week with Tom. We started, delivering the message to say, this is what's happening. This is what is going on. I oftentimes think of that there was a lot of uncertainty. And I would say this for any agent listening, even now, in times of uncertainty, people follow the certain.
Yeah.
And having that message. And that's what we really, the driving mission, I said, we want to have, every family feel confident buying and selling a home. But really what we do is we have the agents back.
Right.
In knowing what is happening in the market.
And the agents are able to deliver that confidence or just the real data to every single family so that they know how to digest it. During those 2 years, what was interesting was we went into a recession, obviously, in 2020.
Yeah.
And you guys had KCM had so much data on what it looks like to the real estate market when you're in a recession.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? I mean, the numbers were actually shocking to me to look at it and say, wow, a recession doesn't mean, a catastrophe for real estate, residential real estate.
Right.
Right. And so we may be coming into one. There's a lot of chatter
Certainly.
that we're coming into one. There's big banks saying 2023.
Sure.
We're looking at maybe another recession looming, whether it's going to be another short one or whatever.
Sure.
This data is important.
Sure. So let's talk about where we're at and why that is so important. What's happening? Inflation's running rampant. Let's say that.
Yep.
That's not going away tomorrow.
Sure.
The Fed is saying we're going to do whatever possible, to control inflation, which means raising the Fed funds rate and the tools they have at their disposal.
And you've
which
seen
is
it with the mortgage interest rate.
Right, which is that translates into forecasting that. Doesn't control it, but they can influence
Exactly.
it. And so their attempt is to slow the economy down. Yeah. All right. If you don't do that perfectly, you end up in a recession. So is there a likelihood? Is there a chance? Certainly in the future. And there are a lot of smart people saying, hey, that's something that could be on the horizon. So what we did at Keeping Current Matters is we went all the way back to the 80s and said, what happens to home prices during a recession? Yeah. Because people, the sort of, back of the napkin math is that every time we have a recession, homes drop in value.
Yeah.
And what we found...
That's the gut instinct for
totally.
People.
Yeah. And what we found is that in the last 6 recessions in this country, 4 of the 6 homes actually appreciated.
Yeah. That was the amazing stat.
2 of the 6, one was 2008.
Yes. We know what happened.
20%. Yeah. I'm going to call that an anomaly for right now, and we'll come back to that. Yeah. The other time, homes dropped less than 2%.
Yes.
Which I would say is negligible.
So it's really flat. 2% is not a big deal.
Yeah. Slight drop.
Yeah.
And then we have this one outlier that, oh, by the way, everybody remembers.
Yeah.
But 4 out of 6 times, homes actually grew in price appreciation.
And the outlier recession was caused by
housing crisis. We were at the epicenter of that downturn.
Really the only recession that you can say that about.
Sure, right, that housing was the catalyst for it. Yeah. We can go into all the reasons we know of, the loan scenario and the mortgage meltdown and all the things that happened. But the conventional wisdom was, hey, in a recession, homes lose value. And it's just not true. Now, here's where this leads to, Byron, which I think is critically important. And here's what I say. For agents, you need to have a relevant market opinion based upon fact.
Yeah.
There are a lot of opinions in our business, very few based upon fact. Sure. You don't have to agree with it, but you do have to look at, here's what happened.
Yeah.
And I think we are heading towards what a lot of experts say. Hey, we could be in the future in the next couple of years entering into a recessionary market. That does not mean housing crisis. We need to understand that. We need to get that in the heads, in the minds of folks that are buying and selling.
Well, I'm certain if we go into a recession, if we have one quarter where it's like, next quarter we might go into, recession, that information is going to be populating again from KCM.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's sort of for the agent, not just for KCM, it's sort of a play that you run.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not
run plays that work, as TF says.
Totally. Yeah. And let's say hypothetically, I'm not calling for that. I'm not saying that. Let's say we go into a recession next year.
Yeah.
That will not be the last recession in this country. So how are you prepared for it? Right. So we're in buyer's market. We're in a seller's market. The great news about our business is there's always a double-ended market. It's either a great time to buy or it's a great time to sell. Yeah. That's the great news about our business.
Even us just talking about a potential recession or these big banks, this is all speculation. Like,
sure,
this could happen if there's a potential for this.
Yeah.
Something I've been speculating on, just starting to think about, I want to run by you here in real time. We haven't talked about this, is that these rising mortgage interest rates, which probably will live somewhere in the 5s, as we continue through this year.
Okay.
If they get to 6, that could mean a whole nother, ball game for how many buyers can stay in the market. But here's where I've been going with it is if we go to, say, high 5s or 6% for an extended period of time, we already have this huge inventory issue.
Sure.
And how many sellers then are going to say, you know what, because the majority of homeowners are locked in under 4% because of all of the refis we've seen over the last couple of years and people obviously purchasing over the last couple of years at these historic low rates. Would we have what I've been coining a cold war in residential real estate, where you just have a freeze out, where even more people now aren't listing their homes, and because of the rates being higher, you have a little bit less demand. Obviously, 1 out of 4 purchases right now are investors, and there's a lot of just almost 50% cash and all this kind of stuff. But would we have maybe a frozen period where I don't think prices drop, but the amount of sales continue to drop volume?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what happens historically in these environments. I will say this. So let's talk about the first 90 days in interest rates in this country. We went from about 3.1% to, let's call it 5, and that's a moving target. Yeah. What essentially has happened is the Fed is foreshadowed to what they're going to do this year. We're going to raise rates, right? Yes. And they're going to raise them until they can slow the economy down and control inflation. That's really what's happening.
Sure.
The market has sort of priced that in. Okay, so we've seen more.
When we say the market, we're talking about
the mortgage market.
Yes,
has priced in that what's coming. What the market doesn't want is a surprise.
Yeah,
right. So they've sort of priced that in, and I think what you can expect is rates to rise, but not at the pace of the first 90 days. Right. We saw the war in Ukraine. We saw the Fed come out and say this. We see inflation. We see all these things happen, and there's this reaction, and we jump a couple of points, really, in interest rates. So I think you're going to see rates rise, but I don't think you're going to see at the pace that we saw. I think we'll be, and I'm not here with a crystal ball to say where we're going to be.
We're in total
at what
speculation
time.
mode.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I don't think you're going to see rates rise as quickly as what you've seen in the last 90 days, but continue to rise. Second point. What happens, and I can get you these graphics, and folks, listening can get the graphics. What happens in rising interest rates environments for home values and volume sold? 2 things I'll tell you. First, on values, you go all the way back to the 90s. Every time we've been in a rising interest rate environment of more than 1%, homes gain value on average 8%. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Because it takes people that are on the fence and they go one of 2 ways. They go, I'm not doing it, or they go, I'm absolutely doing it.
Yeah.
Right? They go, hey,
creates urgency.
I'm getting in before they go any higher. And we know that's happening right now.
Yes.
What does it do to
We're certainly seeing values go up right now.
What do we see volume doing? Typically, again, going back to the 90s, there was one time in the early 90s where rates got up to about 9.5%, where we saw about 11% drop in volume, number of homes sold. That's sort of an outlier. Nobody's calling for that right now. I don't think we're going to see 9 or 10% interest rates this year. Okay, let me be clear on that.
Agree with that.
The other time that volume dropped was during the housing crisis. Mm-hmm. It was about, I think, 8 or 9%. I don't have it all committed to memory, but significant drop, call it 10%. Every other time was negligible, 1 or 2%.
Now, in the first 3 months, we've seen almost a 10% volume drop.
Well, I would say that's not based on volume drop. That's based on lack of inventory.
It's based on last year too, so it's kind of a skewed number.
Anything you compare to 2020 and 2021 is they're anomaly years in real estate. It's very, very hard. We're well ahead, I can tell you, in demand right now, measured by showing time, than where we were in 2021 and certainly prior to the pandemic.
Yeah, and that volume drop is still going to be a huge number this year with really scarce inventory.
Because, and here's the word that I use for that, Byron, is we will not reach market potential this year because we do not have the inventory to do it. If we had the homes to sell, we would sell those homes, no doubt.
Ivy Zellman, who you know very well.
Huge respect for Ivy.
Oh, she's brilliant. Mm-hmm. She said, I think it was Q4, she came out with talking about this 1.5 million homes, the new construction homes that will hit the market in 2023. We're not going to see them this year.
Yeah.
And her original thought was that this was going to create too much inventory localized,
right,
and in certain price points. I've only seen, her touch on that a little bit since then. I believe that was November, December of 21.
Yeah.
And it looks like she's backed off of that.
I think so. Yeah. We have a tremendous amount of respect for Ivy. Let me say
I do
that.
too. I love everything she's doing.
We use Zellman. We use the Z Report in a lot of what we do at Keeping Current Matters. Big fans of hers. Let me break down what she said.
Yeah.
Because I think there is some merit to understanding it, and there's some truth to it. And this is where, again, I'm going to go back to what I said. And what is your relevant market opinion based upon the facts? And I'll tell you what the facts are. But go ahead.
No, and I agree with what she said, and I don't think enough people listened closely. Localized certain price points, but I'll let you jump in.
So here's the issue. Let me break down the issue. Last 14 years in this country, we have been below the 50-year average in the number of builds coming to market. Why is that? Back in 2008, builders were at the epicenter of the housing crisis. They built more homes, they had more lots. I was at Bank of America at that time, working in the distressed asset, area.
What years to be at B of A?
To be an REO agent. We were signing up REO agents like it was no tomorrow. And so back then, if you were a builder and you had to feed your family, you had to get out of the business. Let's be honest. There were 4 years in this country in 04, 05, 06, and 07 where there were more than 1.5 million homes built. Never happened before and hasn't happened since.
Correct.
Okay, so a ton of homes, oversupply. We know how that played out. You're a builder, bad news. You're starting another business, right? Few builders remained, and our hearts go out to all those. Okay, fast forward. We're not building the number of homes that we need. Pandemic comes along. People are like, we're in 2 3/4 30-year fixed interest rate. We're buying. Oh, by the way, I want out of this condo. I want out of this apartment. I'm making a different decision. Home takes on a new meaning for all of us, and we have this surge of demand. We don't have the supply to meet that demand. Okay, that's the reality. And oh, by the way, building is a trade. You don't become a builder tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to grow in that trade. And listen, builders are building. We will build more homes this year than we have in a long time. We'll bust through that 50-year average this year. And to Ivy's point, we'll build even more. That's the reality of the market. If you follow KCM, we've got some great graphics that show that. Literally, there were more homes built in the 70s and 80s in this country than the last 10 years.
Yeah.
All right, let's flip the story to the demand side. A couple of things that are very important and I find extremely interesting. First, largest generation since the baby boomers are millennials.
Yes.
The peak home buying age for millennials peaked in 2020. First-time home buyers.
And millennials are 26 years old to 41, just in case you're like, what's the millennial age group?
The peak first-time home buyer age for the millennials peaked in 2020 and is tailing down. Now, I'm not saying a dramatic drop off, but that number has peaked. Okay, let's be honest about millennials. What's the second thing that we know? The rate of population growth in this country is not what it has been.
Correct.
We are on a downward slide in population growth. So let's deconstruct Ivy's point, because there's a lot of merit to it. Buildings going like this and population growth is going down.
Right.
That's the essence of what she's saying. And she's right.
Yeah.
Now, my counter to that would be, we're not going to be there tomorrow.
Right.
Could we be there in the future? Certainly, if we keep at the throttle pace of building in the next 3, 4, 5, however many years, and the rate of population growth continues to decline, certainly that's the case. I think that is a scenario in the future that is yet to be determined.
Although Gen Z, not as big as the millennial group, is sizable.
Yeah.
And they're going to come into some buying years for sure.
But my point is, let's understand what her point is, and they're valid points in that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I still think there could be a problem brewing in certain areas. Like, I don't really see it in South Florida. That would be one that you might think historically. Maybe Texas, where they're building homes that are at a certain price point that are above the median, where they're building a bunch of these above median priced homes. And there's a clear issue in affordable housing.
Sure, no doubt.
I mean, there's you can't shy away from that.
Right.
Home ownership is still less expensive than renting, but as rents continue to explode, and if we're building too many homes above the median price point where people can actually afford them to get out of their rent, that creates an issue.
And I think that's where. So let's talk about it. At KCM, we talk a lot about affordability, which is what the dollar will buy.
Yeah.
And then there's affordable housing. Two different things.
Way different. Yeah. When I say median, that would be above what people would consider.
Sure. The average
housing.
price home in this country right now is about $360,000.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an average home.
Yeah.
And what do we know? We don't have there's not a market you can go into right now where agents are like, we have a ton of those.
Right.
There's none. And what has happened in COVID is the higher end price points have grown.
Yeah.
Right? That's where you've seen a ton of appreciation, and we need more homes on the lower end. So what does that mean? You're going to see builders building more condos, more attached units. You're going to see more high density.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's going to be what the solution to that is, I think, in the future. Now, the question is, does that outpace demand and all that?
Well, because they can't build single family homes in certain markets at the median price point.
And I think what you're going to see is feast and famine. You're going to see some markets are able to do that. And people, let's be honest, right now in this country are gravitating to lower cost markets. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that is happening too.
Absolutely.
You know, you're in a city or a town where you're like, I can sell my home for what? And I can go over here and buy a home for that. Yeah, you're going to make that decision. That's common sense, provided you can with your job and all those kinds of things. But that is definitely happening.
And there's still opportunities in a lot of these markets. I was just talking to Doug Edrington, who you know. The yesterday, and $300,000 in Chattanooga, Tennessee, $300,000 median price point. Well, that's $60,000 less than what the median is across the country. Right. And so that means there's opportunity there.
Yeah. And we have people listening, I'm sure, in Southern California. They're like, what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, that's what he brought up. He's like, California.
Sure.
California's coming in. Everybody, by the way, says that if they're in a market like Tennessee or Texas or, Florida or some of these places, Arizona certainly as well. 1.6 million agents, highest of all time, right? The stuff that we're talking about here on this pod, all 1.6 million should be armed with this information so that they can deliver it to consumers. I'm excited about all of the new agents coming in because I think there is an opportunity to level up this industry. It's what you guys do every single day.
Yeah.
How many of these 1.6 million will survive? Is it just going to follow the normal trend?
Well, I think the bigger issue right now is, they're about, depending on the month, 300,000 or 400,000 active listings, out there for 1.6 million agents. Now we know, and there's certainly statistics out there about who's doing the business. Yep. But no doubt a lot of people in the last couple of years have gotten into the business. The frenzy in the business will not last. And there will be people that will say, I'm going to go do something else. To put a number on that, I'd be speculating completely.
Well, do you think it follows the 87% that typically fail by year 4? That's the national
probably so.
Number.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of agents that it's like shooting fish in a barrel, and when it's not going to be that way, you're going to figure something out.
What could the industry, NAR, brokerages, teams, whoever, what could the industry do to take that number, which has been sitting at an 87+% failure rate in real estate and reduce it to, I don't know, 75%. That would be a big improvement right there. But you just have never seen it come off of that one number.
Yeah.
What could the industry do as a whole to drop the number?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that are interesting about our business right now. You have the number of people that are in there. You have the number of transactions, which we've seen, again, I go back to market potential. We won't meet that because we don't have the number of homes for sale. And also, let me add another component into that. You have portals and iBuyers that are vying for that dollar. And you have to understand that business, what they're really they want the transaction, but what they really want are the settlement services around the transaction.
All the products.
And they're willing to go after that business and use unique strategies, meaning they don't have to make everything up on the home to get the settlement service in that transaction. What does that mean? That means it is a sort of the term that's coined a lot is the flight to quality. It means we as agents have to be more professional and more educated. So what does that mean for people in the failure rate, like what you're talking about? It means that if you're not equipped with what's happening in the market and you're not the local expert, you're going to struggle there. You're going to fail. Yeah. We talk about the macro US market, but absolutely you have to bring in, are you building in your market? Are you seeing demand grow or demand lessening in your market? So I think one thing is being the market educator. The other piece is just education. And I think our business does a fair job in education, but that true educated agent, the one thing that I love about all the stuff that I get to do with Tom is he believes this: the educated agent wins in today's market. Yeah. And I think we're going to see a market where that's going to become more and more true. So how do we solve that? We have to have an industry that's committed to growing and learning beyond what we've done in the past.
And Tom practices it himself.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why people ask me a lot about that, like our relationship. And I'm like, we provide education. We provide what we believe every agent needs to know. And Tom's like, yes, they must know that.
Absolutely. Agents should be educating themselves every single day. There's, like KCM, there's what Tom's doing. There's a lot of opportunities to get that education. Should every single agent have to have bought or sold a house? Should every agent need to have the experience of being a buyer and a seller, in your opinion?
Gosh, I don't know how you could without that experience.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know what you want and you know what you don't want.
Yeah.
That's the important thing right there. Now, to say they would have to have, I'm sure there are successful agents that have gotten off in the business and haven't had that. Yeah. But I think no doubt for any of us in the business, the quest to change the way people are buying homes and to be the agent of value, to be the knowledge broker, most times comes out of those transactions that we've seen or we've experienced that was not the case. So I think it's hard if you don't have that.
It's a different, thing to represent somebody and then actually go through that experience yourself. But you do hear a lot of agents that haven't bought, that have, maybe been a renter.
What do you think?
Where they're like, oh, I think absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
You have got to go through that experience. And if you come into the industry as a renter and you're an agent, you should be on a 2-year plan of how do I help serve 60 clients so that I've got the money built up so that I can go out and become a first-time home buyer myself.
Yeah.
I think you absolutely have to go through that experience. If not before, within the first 24 months, it should be your mission. I always say double-digit sales, double-digit reviews. The next step to that is buy a house for yourself.
Yeah.
Right? That's invaluable experience. Yeah. I went through the mortgage crisis years.
Yeah.
So 19 years old, 20 years old, 21 years old, bought a house each year.
Yeah.
With these terrible loans, lost everything by my mid-20s.
Yeah.
So when I got into real estate sales, I used to say, hey, I went bankrupt in real estate so that you don't have to. I'm here to help. Sure. Like that was my my unique pitch to buyers, sellers, and investors, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, whoa, don't say that, Byron. People like agents were like, you probably no. What happened when I got in the bottom of the market, when all the other agents were getting out, and I was using that as my unique advantage, my elevator pitch to help people in their real estate transaction, the trust was automatic. Like it was built in because I was coming with so much transparency to the situation.
Right.
And people really resonated with that, as opposed to, this is the one thing that drives me nuts when people get into the business. They'll get into the business and they'll say, well, I just love homes.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if you hear that from new agents.
Sure. Yeah,
I love homes. I just love,
yeah.
design and all. And that's fine, but you will sound like the majority of agents.
Sure.
You're not separating yourself with something that is going to resonate deeply with a buyer, seller, or an investor.
Yeah.
They've got to really be able to understand what your value is to them.
Yeah.
And just loving homes, that doesn't resonate with many consumers. They need a house because they need some shelter. Right. And so they got to know that they trust you as the advisor to get them into the right situation.
Yeah. I think that's no doubt the world that we live in, is that agents that are doing that are the advisor, are winning. There are a lot of people out there like, I want a flexible schedule. I want whatever the deal is, and we know what the fallacy of that is too.
Oh yeah.
But I want to go back to something. You talked about the challenge of the housing crisis and how that kind of birthed your mission.
Yeah.
And one thing that's really clear looking back on that, and I went through that in the business too, and it's really, really tough. Don't ever want to go back there, all those things. But the interesting thing, now looking back 14 years ago, is it birthed so many good things in our business. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but in my life, I've never learned anything when the wind was at my back. Well, I learned everything when we're like, oh gosh, we got to sort of figure this out, and I don't ever want to do that again. And I think there are some very real signs in real estate today that positive things happen.
It's very hard to get a loan right now.
And I can go through just a litany of things in that, because the reason I bring that up, the biggest question that I get, and I think agents are struggling with right now, is, are we about to have a housing crisis? Yeah. Is that about to happen again? And there's a lot of evidence out there that people go, outside of the truth, that people are like, I'm very scared about that.
Well, if you look at any TikTok comment or Instagram comment, when somebody puts out information around this current market, some of the clips that we put out from this podcast right here, where you're talking about the data, there are going to be comments on just your average consumer that doesn't study it like you do.
Sure.
That is saying 2007, 2008 all over again, 2007 times 10.
Sure.
There's a huge bubble. I'm waiting for this to burst. That's when I'm going to jump in. There's a lot of negativity saying this market is going to crash, and I'm just waiting. Now, some of these people have been saying this for 10 years, and it hasn't happened.
Right.
But that's the comment section on social.
Totally. And you know what? What's the old saying? They've predicted 8 out of the last 12 crashes or whatever it is. I think the reality is people are always going to do that.
Yeah.
Let's talk real world.
But other consumers read those comments.
Yeah. And I understand.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is put something out there that you're not equipped to answer. And I understand that. But let me give you just a case in point right now. Dallas Fed came out last week.
Saw that.
And said, what's the word that was in the title? Bubble. Okay,
Such a great clickbait title.
Let me just tell you, I don't know how many people listening to this saw that headline. Probably a lot.
Yeah.
If you're in real estate right now and you didn't see that headline, then we need to talk about something else.
Didn't consume the information, maybe.
Didn't read the report. No consumers read the report.
Yeah.
We did. I've been through it. Let me tell you what we agree with.
Yeah.
The entire thing.
Yeah.
Except for the title.
Yeah. Yes.
That's the reality. And you know what they said? Prices can't continue going up like this. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And it's getting harder for people to buy a home. I agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what's the title? Are we on the verge of another bubble? So the problem, and I think we could talk all day on this, Byron. It's a bigger problem in the world of a title or clickbait that does not lead to what you thought it was. And what consumers do, all they do is they read the title and they make their formed opinion about what they think, and then you're off to the races. You don't even get the chance to have that conversation.
Well, here's the other thing. Those titles, those headlines have conditioned people to now, when they're even listening to a piece of content or they're watching a clip on Instagram, to pick out one word and focus on it, and they didn't even they totally blanked out on the last like 15 seconds of the clip.
Sure.
Where the one word housing crash, boom, they've just now ignored the rest of the 30 seconds and they're like, there's a housing crash.
Yeah.
Because they're conditioned because of the headlines in media to focus on the danger word and not listen to the rest of the story sometimes.
And that's not just real estate. This
goes into everything.
Now let me give you a couple of facts about today's market. First of all, 2008, the reason the market imploded was because of essentially adjustable rate mortgages, and there were some other products in there, but let's call those adjustable rates. Homes lost value. You're underwater. You literally owe more than what the home is worth, and you walk away. That was 2008.
And the adjustable rate was given to anybody.
Absolutely. You didn't have to qualify. You think about the loan products, 80-10-10, essentially 100% financing.
Yeah.
We lost 20% value on average in homes. That's you borrow $100,000. Now that house is worth 80. You're in trouble. 2
of the loans that I got, I said I bought 3 houses, ages 19, 20, 21. 2 of the loans I wouldn't qualify for today. The second 2, had I, with that income that I had, that situation, those prices, I wouldn't qualify today.
Yeah.
All that's changed.
I hear you in that. Well, back then you didn't have to qualify. Yeah. Let's be honest. It was like, how much do you make? Let us know. And
qualification has changed so much.
There were a couple of terms coined back then. The first term was irrational exuberance, which was, okay, I don't care what I pay for the house because by 5 o'clock it's going to be worth $50,000 more.
That was me.
Doesn't matter, right? And let me be honest. Let's talk about this in our business. Is there some exuberance in the market today? There is. If you're wondering,
not
there
like
is.
that.
Not like that, but there are people buying homes going, we just want to get in it. There's a frenzy in the market.
Yeah,
that's what I'm going to call it.
For sure.
Okay, let's talk about what's different today. First of all, there are a couple of scenarios you can obtain 100% financing, but they aren't out there. Maybe a VA loan, you can get 3.5 down on FHA, all those things. But by and large, people are putting real money down on homes today.
Yes.
Okay. First American came out last week and said the average LTV, loan to value in this country, is higher than it's ever been before. The average equity in a home is over $300,000, $307,000 as recorded by First American.
Yeah, it's huge.
That was not the case. So if you were going to, let me just tell you, if you were going to make a case for a bubble, you'd have to say, okay, here's the scenario where the average home loses $300,000.
Yeah.
I don't see it, but bring it to me if you believe that.
A lot of these buyers, to your point, bigger down payments right now, they're saying, hey, I may be buying at the top-ish.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable with that, where back then it was, I'm buying because this thing is just going to keep going up.
Totally.
And I'm riding the wave. And that's where I was at. I was so uneducated.
It's a lifestyle and this is important to us decision. Oh, by the way, if you're going above ask, you've got to come out of pocket on that. You can't finance that. So that's very different. Here's a shocking number from Freddie Mac. In 2005, 2 out of 5 mortgages in this country were adjustable rate mortgages.
Wow.
2 out of 5. You go to 2021, less than 1 out of 100 were adjustable rate mortgages.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to be sitting in a ARM right now.
By the way,
it's hard to
people
do that.
were
You
like,
can't even get it.
Coming out of 2008, they're like, that was a bad word. Why would you ever want an ARM? Look at what happened. Now, listen, I don't think ARMs are bad loans. I don't believe they're bad loans. They're misused loans all day long. But ARMs aren't bad loans. I do think we'll see a resurgence of ARMs as rates rise. People will say, you know what, there may be a way that we want to finance this home. And if you're getting the advice on that and that's the right decision for you, then you should go down that road.
Especially if there's belief that they'll come down, which I think there is belief long term that rates do kind of come back down under 4 at some point in the future.
Certainly history suggests that once rates rise a year later, they're lower.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Oh, by the way, you mentioned before the R word, recession. If that were to happen, guess what happens? What's the biggest lever the Fed can influence? It's housing. What pulls America out of every in economic crisis is housing. The U.S. economy will never return out of a recession unless it's led by housing.
Besides the Fed, what can the government do to help the inventory issue?
Gosh, I think you're going to start to see that be sort of a burning building in Washington that people will run to, meaning that's the biggest issue.
Midterms coming up, that could be a campaign.
I think
pitch.
it's going to be an issue. I think affordable housing, that first time home buyers, folks in the lower end can buy, is going to be a big issue. I think they're going to solve that with a lot of high density legislation. There's folks that have opinions on that and what that means. I think
Dave
there are
Chappelle
things.
had a big opinion on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're locally in his town,
in his market,
and we all have different opinions on that, certainly. But I think it's going to have to be addressed in some of those ways, in ways where it is more affordable to go out and build. Now, what has typically happened is we've talked about how do we help more people buy homes in this country. And listen, we're in this business. I want to see everybody that can afford and wants to buy a home. I want to see them buy a home. But we don't have a demand problem.
No.
We have a supply problem.
Yeah.
And the solutions, I think you are going to see it start to be a hot button for legislation and for midterms and things like that, because it's not sustainable. People are like, how are we going to go out and buy a home?
So if you're an agent and you made it this far, one big takeaway is the way David answers, I think, almost every single question. Typically, what we've seen. And I think that's the biggest takeaway any agent, team, broker can use in the way they talk to consumers, but also the way they put out their marketing, right?
Sure.
And the message that they send out with clarity into whatever their local market is. Typically, here's what we've seen.
Yeah.
Here's the data. Here's what's happened in the past, because that's likely to predict the future. So
I'll
that's
use
the
a couple.
big takeaway.
I want to give you a couple things on that, because it's interesting. You draw.
Let's wrap up with a couple points.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there are a couple lines that I'll use. Typically, here's what's happened. Here's what I'm alluding to. I'm foreshadowing to. Here's what's happened in the past. Well, let's kind of wrap this up where we started. Do you have a relevant market opinion based upon fact? Yeah. Here's what you can't do. You can't just go out and say, hey, here's what I think is going to happen, without saying what happened in the past. You could say, here's what's happened in the past, and here's what I believe to happen in the future.
Because if you don't do the first thing, you're guessing.
Yes. The other thing that is, if you want to disarm a conversation or a couple of things, I'll give you a couple ways to do that. First, somebody comes at you and thinks, you get back to TikTok and Instagram comments, or let's say you're having that conversation with somebody. Yeah. Here would be my response to you. Let's say you said, hey, David, I think we're about to fall off a cliff in housing and we're all going to die and whatever. Byron, you seem passionate about that. Tell me why. And then just listen.
Yeah. Yeah. And where are you getting that information? That's going to be the
that's what I would draw. But here's the reality. There are a lot of people that feel that way because a family member, somebody they loved, went through a really tough time back in 2008.
Yeah.
And we need to respect that. We need to understand. We always learn to fight the last war. We always learn, hey, this happened, and now this is going to happen again, right? I was walking down the street the other day, and the dog bit me. So what's going to happen next time I walk down the street? The dog's going to be there. It's going to bite me. Here's the other line that I would use in that. So first of all, you seem passionate about that. Why do you feel that way? Here's the second one you can use as an agent. Here's what I know. Here's what I know about past recessions.
Yes.
I know that 6 of the past recessions, actually 4 times, homes grew in value.
Yeah.
2 times they lost value. One was the housing crisis. The other time, we can go through those lines. But if you're confident, and here's what's typically happened, here's what I know, you can always have a conversation. And you may even have a conversation where somebody says, well, you know what, I appreciate that, but I have a different opinion. Great.
Yeah.
Let's just look at what's happened in the market. And in our job, I believe, Byron, going back to just a great conversation to have, is today you have to be the knowledge broker.
Yes.
You have to have that information, because the amount of decisions and quick, impulsive responses to a headline that are made are, what everybody's doing. Yes. But if you look a little bit deeper and say, this is what's actually going on, you'll be able to help somebody. And here's what I always say. You don't want to use this information to convince somebody to do something they don't want to do. But if somebody were to not make a decision because they were misinformed, I would hate for that to happen.
Yeah. Think about how many people, if they were not to make a decision in 2020 about buying a home, how disappointed they would be about
Think about the
renting for the last 2
wealth
years.
that you missed out on.
Correct.
Home ownership is the greatest channel to building wealth in this country.
It is.
There's nothing
And that's proven.
anywhere remotely close to it.
That's right.
Home ownership is the number one wealth building tool. There are people in the last year, let's be honest, that have sold their homes thinking, I'm going to wait for prices to go down.
Yeah.
Dave Ramsey always says the only ones that get hurt on the roller coaster are the ones that get off during the ride.
That's right.
And I think that truth is alive and well in our business today. We've got to be the educator to say, here's what's happening. Here's what's going on.
Yeah, I love it. David, you are really adding a ton of value. I mean, I hope you guys picked up on that last part of this pod, because that is the big takeaway, and that's how agents can really help everybody out there. So appreciate you coming on.
Thank you. As always, great to be with you.
Make sure you check out David on the Walkthrough podcast on the BAM channel. So
Thanks for having me on.
we got some more conversations with you coming.
Sounds good.